WeatherStone Youth, welcome to Wednesday Word. This is 15 minutes or less. Today is a good day. Man, I'm so excited to talk to y'all tonight. This is a message that is something that I believe, is something that I've lived through, is something that is very vulnerable for me to talk about. But it's something that God has brought me through. It's something that I'm on the other side of, and I'm excited to share it with you. And hopefully it will encourage you, it will inspire you. Tonight, I'm going to share with you guys some things that I've dealt with, some things that I've gone through, some things that I've worked through in my life, because I believe that it will help you today. So here's the deal. Tonight, I'm calling this, What Are You Telling Yourself? So it's often difficult for me to think great things about myself. I find it even more difficult to say great things about me. And I don't mean in a cocky way. I don't mean saying great things like in a cocky way or conceited way, but I mean saying things about myself this in a I know who I am kind of way. It's kind of difficult for me to say those things. And I found in my experiences that it's much easier to think and say not so great things about myself than it is to say the good things about myself. Let me be clear. I don't want us to think that we're supposed to talk about ourselves with rose-colored glasses on. That is not what I'm saying. We should not be looking through a lens of I'm the greatest thing ever. No. There's always space for us to grow. There's always opportunity for us to get better. Don't hear that. But what I am saying is that we have to learn to speak life to ourselves and not death. The Bible says that life and death is in the power of the tongue. That means what we say has power, has actual power to become, to manifest, to actually show up. So the more that we say bad things, or the more that we dwell on the bad things in our life, or we speak death over our lives, the more that it will show up. So we have to begin to shift and learn to speak life to ourselves and not death. Speak the things that we want to be. Speak the things that we know that we are. Speak the things that people have said about us in the past, or things that people are saying about us now. Begin to dwell on those things and speak those things over our life. And those things will manifest, and they will become, and they will show up in our lives. So, where's all this coming from? One day I was sitting at Barnes & Noble. This was years and years ago. But I was sitting at Barnes & Noble, and I began to think about my life, all of my experiences, all the things that I've done, all the people that I've met and known and been around and spent time with. I started to think about those things. And I found myself in the middle of that, sifting through all of these thoughts and these moments and experiences. And I began to dwell on the things that I've done wrong. I begin to let my mind linger there and think about those things over and over. And then that ain't even the worst part. The worst part is I begin to speak to myself about how great I wasn't, about my lack of greatness. And allow me to be vulnerable here. Oftentimes in my life, I think things about myself that I would never say to someone else, that I would never tell someone else. And a lot of times they're things that I would never say to myself, but in my head, they are there. They are living. They are alive. And that's a problem, right? I'm talking harsh things. I'm talking things that I would never say about other people, things that I would never want someone to know that I thought. But they overwhelm my mind sometimes. And I'm guessing that if that's the way life has been for me, and I'm guessing that if that's how my mind has been, I'm guessing that some of you may be dealing with the same type of thing. So I'm praying that tonight will help. Those thoughts would change. They would take me from a smile to a frown. They would take me from outgoing and happy to sad, and I want to just lay down. That's a problem. That's the difference in life and death. I'm thankful for the grace of God and how he's brought me through. Again, this is stuff that I've dealt with, that I've come through. But I'm thankful and I'm grateful for the grace of God that he's brought me through. And we talked about grace last week. If you haven't seen it, go back on our YouTube and check it out. Pastor Dana and myself, we talked about grace and mercy. And so go back and check that out if you haven't seen it. But again, I am grateful for the grace of God in my life. And I'm grateful that he has brought me through. And I pray that what I've learned tonight will help you. There are two concepts. There are two thoughts that I've learned, two things that I've learned that helped me get through this. And I hope to God that it would encourage you tonight. Number one, I had to forgive myself. Number two, I had to put 2 Corinthians 10:5 into practice. And I'll read 2 Corinthians 10:5 to you in a second. But here's what I've discovered. The reason these negative thoughts linger is because I actually feel bad about my mistakes. I feel bad for what I've done. I wish sometimes that I hadn't done them. And for me, the worst of it all is that I wish I hadn't enjoyed them, because I did. That hurts my heart, that I made mistakes that I knew were mistakes, and I enjoyed the mistakes. And it's crazy because the Bible says sin is fun for a season. Sin is fun for a season. That's just true. Trust me, I've lived it. But God began to show me that he had forgiven me, and now I needed to forgive myself. Wow. So I'm running around with these thoughts lingering, and God goes, hey, you asked me for forgiveness. You asked me, you told me, you came to me repentant, told me you were sorry. You asked for forgiveness, and I gave it to you. Now you need to forgive yourself. And for me, that was difficult. That was tough. And I had to work through it. Again, my process, but I had to work through getting myself to the place where I could look and say, yes, God has forgiven me. I need to forgive myself. Yes, I messed up, but his grace covers me, and I'm okay now. You see, even though I enjoyed the moments, those moments brought shame and regret with them. Now, God was saying, receive my grace, forgive yourself, and let it go. So when I'm thinking about forgiving myself, it's not just forgiving myself for the act. It's allowing me to let shame go. It's allowing me to let the hatred of who I was go. I have to let it go. I messed up. I made a mistake. I'm wrong. I've already asked forgiveness, and now I need to receive God's grace and forgive myself and let it go. Second thing I learned is this, 2 Corinthians 10:5. This is what it says. It says, take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. And I understood when I read that in a way that I never had understood before. And I hope you can catch this understanding. But I understood there were two steps to that. There's the part to take captive every thought. And then the second part is to make it obedient to Christ. The first step was to begin taking control of my thoughts and stop letting them linger. For me, that was where my spiral began. It wasn't in the thought, the actual thought. It was in the lingering. It was in the allowing the thought to stay there. So the Bible is telling me now, take captive that thought. It's not something that I'm looking to God and going, God, would you help me not think about this anymore? Would you help me? No, God is putting the ball in our court, and he's saying, you take captive of your thoughts. That's my job. If I don't do it, who will? No one will. There's no one that can take captive what's going through my head except for me. There's no one that can stop letting things linger in my head except for me. And so first I have to take captive those thoughts. The second part is make it obedient to Christ. How do I do that? How do I make my thoughts obedient to Christ? For I'm taking captive those thoughts. I've said I can't think about that. I shouldn't think about that. I don't want to think about that. I won't think about that. But how do I shift those thoughts and make them obedient to Christ? How do I do that? That's when I learned this idea of Philippians 4:8 filter. Philippians 4:8 says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And I learned this concept of running every thought through the Philippians 4:8 filter. And it's kind of funny because one of my leaders when I was in high school would say this all the time. She would say, "It's not easy, but it's worth it." It's not easy, but it's worth it. And she was right. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to have this 4:8 filter, this Philippians 4:8 filter, but it will change everything. When you use that filter, the negative thoughts can't stay. Because now you're taking now you're taking captive your thought. I shouldn't be thinking about that. But now you're going to make it obedient. So what does obedient to Christ look like? It looks like it's true. It looks like it's noble, it's right, it's pure, it's lovely, it's admirable, it's praiseworthy, it's excellent. Right? So when those thoughts start to linger or try to linger, you go, is this true? If it's not true, it can't stay. Is this right? If it's not right, it can't stay. Is this noble? If it's not noble, it can't stay. Is it pure? Is it lovely? Is it admirable? Is it excellent? Is it praiseworthy? If my thoughts don't line up with that, then I have to stop thinking whatever I am thinking and make them obedient. What does obedient mean? Well, what lines up with Philippians 4:8? Often for me in my life, how I switch up those thoughts, how I change those thoughts, is I begin to think about Jesus. I begin to think about Jesus. Jesus embodies every part of that filter. He's true, he's right, he's noble, he's praiseworthy, he's excellent, he's faithful, he's lovely, he's pure, all of those things. Jesus is everything that verse speaks about. And I've learned that other than my wife, the words I say to myself carry far more weight than anything anybody else could ever say to me. What's crazy to me is that I don't really believe the things that I say to myself in my head. When those thoughts of how terrible I am and how they become overwhelming. And what that does in my life is I get less motivated and I get more complacent. And I don't want to be that person. And I hope to God that you don't want to be that person. Lingering thoughts turn into graceless conclusions of who I am and who I can become, which then turns into complacency and lack of motivation all over again. And I got to break the cycle. We have to break the cycle. We break the cycle by forgiving ourselves of our past, of our mistakes, of our mess ups, and we practice 2 Corinthians 10:5. I hope this journey becomes a priority for you. I hope it's something that you can work through just like I worked through it. Listen, God is no respecter of persons. So if I worked through it, you can work through it. If he helps me through it, he can help you through it. I love you. Can't wait to see you next week. Can't wait till we can be back together again. Oh my gosh. I can't wait. I love y'all. Peace out.